Imagine waking up next to someone whose idea of romance is dragging home a bloody mammoth leg, who thinks a rock is fine dining tableware, and whose morning routine doesn't include brushing his teeth, but gnawing on raw roots instead. Sounds wild. Well, what if that someone was your husband? What if you actually married a caveman? The truth, once we dig into it, might disturb you more than you think. Picture this. The sun hasn't even risen and you're already awake, because the ground beneath your bed, it is a pile of furs and leaves, is cold and damp. There's no soft mattress, no cozy blanket, and certainly no alarm clock. Instead, the low growl of a predator outside the cave jolts you into consciousness. And lying next to you, your caveman husband, snoring loudly, smelling like smoke and last night's half-cooked meat. Life with a caveman isn't the romanticized back-to-nature fantasy some people might imagine. It's survival, day in and day out. Your partner's main focus isn't planning a date night or remembering anniversaries. It's staying alive. He leaves before sunrise armed with crude weapons, risking his life to hunt animals many times his size. If he returns with food, it's a victory. If he doesn't, both of you may go hungry. And then there's hygiene, or rather, the complete absence of it. Forget showers, soap, or toothpaste. The best you can hope for is a rinse in a freezing river, and even that depends on the season. Your caveman's teeth, yellow, chipped, and likely rotting. His body, covered in cuts, scars, and layers of dirt that don't wash off easily. Intimacy under these conditions is far from what we'd call romantic. But marriage isn't just about physical survival. It's about communication. And here lies another challenge. Your husband doesn't speak in flowing sentences, or even full words most of the time. Instead, you get grunts, gestures, and maybe the occasional rough sketch in the dirt. Misunderstandings are constant. Did he mean to share that piece of meat, or was that a warning growl to keep your hands off it? This is your daily reality. No comfort, no certainty, and very little affection in the way we know it today. Living with a caveman means your marriage isn't built on love songs or candlelight dinners. It's built on firewood, survival instincts, and constant compromise with danger. Now let's talk about roles in this prehistoric marriage. Forget modern ideas of equality. There are no joint bank accounts, no who's cooking tonight debates, and certainly no Netflix and chill. Instead, survival dictates everything. The caveman hunts, fights off predators, and defends the territory. You, as his partner, are expected to gather plants, tend the fire, and prepare whatever food he drags back from the hunt. It sounds simple, but it's grueling. Imagine spending hours searching for edible roots and berries, hoping you don't accidentally poison yourself or your family. Imagine kneeling over a fire, your eyes stinging from smoke just to keep the flames alive. Because without fire, your nights aren't just cold, they're deadly. And then there's the constant danger. Living in a cave doesn't mean you're safe. At any moment, a predator, a saber-toothed cat, a wolf pack, or even a rival tribe could show up at the entrance. Your husband's response is usually brute force. His world doesn't allow for negotiation or compromise. Conflict is solved with fists, rocks, or sharpened sticks. And you learn to stay quiet, stay small, and stay alert. Social life is another strange adjustment. Your community might be a handful of other families huddled together, but don't expect friendly potlucks. Sharing is often limited, trust is fragile, and jealousy runs high. If your husband sees another man looking at you, the result isn't a calm discussion. It's likely a violent confrontation. To him, marriage isn't about partnership in the way we think of it. It's possession, territory, survival of his bloodline. In this world, every day feels borrowed. Every meal is a gamble. And every interaction with your caveman husband reminds you that the marriage you've entered is less about romance and more about endurance. Now let's get personal. What does intimacy look like when you're married to a caveman? Well, brace yourself, because it's nothing like the stories of candlelit passion you might be imagining. For a caveman, affection isn't expressed with gentle words or thoughtful gestures. It's raw, instinct-driven, and often startlingly one-sided. His concept of bonding is closer to claiming than cherishing. You wouldn't expect compliments, surprise gifts, or warm hugs. Instead, the closest thing to affection might be him tossing you a share of his hard-won meat, a primal way of saying, "You matter to me because keeping you alive matters to my survival too." It's a partnership built less on romance and more on necessity. Raising children only adds to the weight of this life. If you and your caveman have offspring, survival becomes even more complicated. Infants in this era are fragile, with little protection against disease, predators, or hunger. While you try to keep the child alive with constant care, your husband sees fatherhood through a different lens. Not as nurturing, but as ensuring the child is strong enough to carry his bloodline forward. Tenderness is rare. Survival is everything. And let's not ignore the emotional toll this kind of marriage would take. The absence of real communication, comfort, or a sense of safety leaves you constantly on edge. You'd live with the awareness that your husband is both your protector and, in some ways, your greatest threat. His temper is quick, his patience thin, and his ability to understand your feelings practically non-existent. So yes, life with a caveman might keep you alive, but it would drain you too. Every day, you'd lose a little more of the comfort, love, and emotional stability that define modern marriage. It's a harsh reminder that what we take for granted today, intimacy, equality, and security, simply didn't exist when survival ruled every choice. Up to now, we've painted the picture of daily life with a caveman, the dirt, the danger, and the endless grind for survival. But here's where things take an even more unsettling turn. The disturbing truths that come with being tied to someone whose worldview is entirely primal. The first and perhaps most shocking reality is violence. For cavemen, aggression wasn't just an option, it was a way of life. Survival in the prehistoric world meant that strength equaled power. In a marriage, that power imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. Disagreements aren't solved with calm conversations or compromises. Instead, they're often settled with brute force. If your caveman husband feels disrespected, threatened, or even jealous, the response could be physical, sudden, uncontrollable, and frightening. Another truth lies in the absence of emotional intimacy. Cavemen weren't wired for heart-to-heart conversations or deep emotional bonds in the way we experience them today. Their focus was on reproduction and survival of the fittest, not on nurturing love or understanding. To your husband, marriage isn't a sacred vow, it's a biological contract. He protects you because you carry his children, not because of affection. And that realization is deeply disturbing. Then there's loyalty, or the lack of it. While modern relationships value fidelity, caveman instincts were different. Spreading their genes to ensure survival was a biological drive. Your husband might not view exclusivity as natural or necessary. To him, love isn't about devotion to one person. It's about ensuring as many offspring as possible. That means betrayal, as we see it today, wouldn't even cross his mind as wrong. So when you peel back the layers of living with a caveman, you find a marriage stripped of the emotional safety nets we rely on. Instead, you're left with a stark, unsettling truth. To a caveman, marriage is not about love. It's about survival, dominance, and reproduction. Another disturbing truth about marrying a caveman lies in how women were perceived. In today's world, we see marriage as a partnership, ideally built on respect and shared responsibility. But in the prehistoric mind, a wife was less a partner and more a resource. Just like fire, food, or shelter, you were part of his survival toolkit. You provided children, kept the hearth alive, and ensured his lineage. Beyond that, your value wasn't seen in emotional terms, but in practical ones. This outlook created a chilling reality. Consent, as we understand it, simply didn't exist. The concept of personal choice or bodily autonomy wasn't part of the caveman's worldview. Relationships were often about dominance, and a wife was seen as property to protect, control, or even trade. From our modern perspective, it's not just unsettling, it's terrifying. And then comes the issue of fear as a constant companion. Your caveman husband wasn't just a provider, he was also the figure you feared the most. His raw temper, his impulsive reactions, and his inability to distinguish between threat and misunderstanding could leave you feeling trapped. Imagine living every day in a delicate balance, grateful for his protection from predators, but anxious about the predator that exists within him. But perhaps the most disturbing truth is how normal this was for the time. In the prehistoric world, there were no alternatives, no better husbands waiting for you. No option to walk away and live independently. Your survival was tied to his, whether you liked it or not, and this dependence meant tolerating things that in today's world would be unimaginable. When we strip away the romanticized idea of the strong primal protector, what we're left with is sobering. A marriage that thrives on fear, necessity, and survival instinct, rather than compassion, partnership, or love. It's not just uncomfortable. It forces us to question what it really means to be human in a relationship. Here's the final piece of the disturbing truth. Marrying a caveman doesn't just challenge your safety or your emotions. It forces you to confront what humanity really looked like before civilization. Think about health and survival odds. Your caveman husband might be strong, but he's also constantly injured. Broken bones, infected wounds, and untreated illnesses were part of everyday life. Without medicine, something as small as a tooth infection or a fever could become deadly. You wouldn't just worry about him providing food, you'd worry if either of you would even survive the year. And in that struggle, marriage became less about love, more about forming a fragile shield against extinction. Then comes the psychological toll. Living in constant fear and uncertainty chips away at who you are. Without communication, tenderness, or stability, you'd feel more like a survival partner than a spouse. The disturbing truth is that such a marriage could strip away your identity, replacing your sense of self with a permanent state of vigilance. You stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "How do I endure another day?" But perhaps the most unsettling realization is this: we carry echoes of those marriages in us today. Our instincts, jealousy, protectiveness, dominance, attraction to strength, all trace back to that primal foundation. In some ways, marrying a caveman forces us to confront just how much of modern love is built on ancient survival wiring. Sure, we've wrapped it in romance, vows, and values, but underneath, the raw, primitive instincts are still there. So, what's the truth about marrying a caveman? It isn't a fairy tale of primal love. It's a story of survival, fear, dominance, and the slow, painful beginnings of what would one day evolve into the marriages we know today. And that truth, unsettling as it is, makes us appreciate just how far humanity has come, and how fragile those advances really are. So what if you really married a caveman? At first glance, it might sound like a wild fantasy, rugged strength, primal survival, a raw connection to nature. But once you step into that cave, the reality is far from romantic. You'd find yourself in a world ruled by hunger, fear, and dominance. A world where love songs don't exist, anniversaries don't matter, and the bond between husband and wife isn't about affection. It's about survival. And that's the disturbing truth. A caveman's marriage wasn't a union of hearts, but a contract written in blood, fire, and instinct. It reminds us how far humanity has traveled. From grunts and stone tools to vows, rings, and lifelong promises built on trust and emotion. But here's the twist. Even today, shadows of that primal past still live in us. The jealousy, the protective instincts, the pull towards strength. They're echoes of those ancient relationships. We've evolved, but we haven't erased the caveman inside us. And maybe that is why these what-if questions feel so unsettling, because part of us knows the line between then and now isn't as thick as we'd like to believe. So as you think about what it would mean to marry a caveman, ask yourself, do we really want the raw truth of our primal past? Or are we grateful that love, as fragile and imperfect as it is today, has grown beyond survival into something deeper? If this journey into the disturbing side of human history made you stop and think, then make sure you subscribe for more thought-provoking explorations. Drop a comment with your own take. Would you have survived life with a caveman, or would you have run for the hills? And of course, don't forget to hit that like button if you are glad you don't have to share a cave with your spouse. Because one thing's for sure, marriage today might have its struggles, but at least it doesn't involve saber-toothed tigers at the front door.